Well, thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon or this morning. My name's Yvonne Garcia. I'm the chair of the Chamber's Women Network Advisory Board. I'm also the chief of staff to State Street's chairman and CEO, Ron O'Hanley, and head of communications at State Street. So as you know, as we continue to adapt to these unprecedented times and just quite difficult times lately, the Women's Network really remains committed to just ensuring that we stay connected, and this is across all industries, across all career levels, and just to make sure that we truly understand the importance of a network, and now more than ever, and that we leverage that network, whether it be for professional or personal reasons. The network board, started by one of our advisory board members, have a session where we just come on screen and talk about how things are going and how we're feeling about all going on in our country at the moment. And it's extremely helpful. So I truly hope that you too leverage the network for any need that you may have. I'd like to take a moment and welcome anyone who's joining us for the very first time. We, of course, typically, like every other board out there, typically hold these in person. It's very engaging, but I do appreciate everyone taking the time to come in via virtually, and still hope that you get as much out of it. I encourage you to join us in today's discussion on social media. For those who come to our events, we're extremely active on social media. It's hashtag BossBizWomen and the @Boston Chamber sign for LinkedIn. Please share what you're hearing. We have extraordinary speakers today that are going to give you just a lot of great insight into how to navigate during these tough times. So please share the insight with others of what you hear. If you have any questions, I see a lot of you are already using the chat feature. Please enter your questions for our guest speakers in the chat feature at the bottom of your screens. This program is also being recorded so that we can post it on YouTube, on our YouTube page afterwards, for anyone who may have not had the opportunity to join us today. So now to the exciting part. For today's program, we're thrilled to have the opportunity to hear from Kelly Fredrickson. She's the head of Boston's biggest ad agency, MullenLowe. And I also would like to give a big thank you to our Women's Network sponsor, Morgan Lewis. Without them, we wouldn't be able to bring this to you. So thank you for their support and partnership to bring the content and platform to us all. So with that, I'd like to welcome Lisa Barton. She's the managing partner of the Morgan Lewis office, who will have the pleasure of introducing today's guest speaker. So thank you and stay well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Yvonne. It's my pleasure to be here. On behalf of Morgan Lewis, it's my honor to introduce today's guest speaker, Kelly Fredrickson. As president of MullenLowe, Kelly is the head of Boston's largest advertising agency. Her clientele is made up of some of the most progressive and innovative companies, ranging from JetBlue and Royal Caribbean to Avis, Zipcar, and Burger King, just to name a few. With the goal of creating long-term change, Kelly is committed to advocating for diversity and inclusion, and is focused on both current and future leadership. She has grown, sponsored, mentored, and championed several of MullenLowe's employee-led diversity organizations, and sits on the board of the 3% movement, which was created to raise the percentage of female creative directors and people of color in advertising from 3% to 50%. Kelly previously served as Senior Vice President of Marketing at Bank of America, and is the creator of an online forum for professional and personal development. As both one of Boston Business Journal's Power 50 leaders and a Rozoff Award nominee, Kelly is in a league of her own, and we admire her passion and commitment for empowering those around her and changing the face of our city. Kelly, we thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Okay. I'm so happy to be here with you all. We were supposed to be in person together in April. So I'm so happy that all of you have joined on this new world that we are navigating called Zoom. A little bit ago, I was having a conversation with my friend and former colleague, Elizabeth Paul, and she made the incredible observation that as an agency, we were helping our clients to market in the time of earthquakes. And as I thought about meeting with all of you today, I thought rather than tell you this like very neat and tidy story of my 30-year career in advertising and marketing, which in retrospect always sounds like I planned everything and it was intentional, and it isn't, I thought that I would instead talk to you about what it's like to lead in the time of earthquakes. In 1908, in Italy, there was the most deadly earthquake of the 20th century. It came at 5:20 in the morning with supposedly no warning. It killed 100,000 people. There was major damage along the coastline in Sicily, through the Messina Straits and into the mainland of Regina. 90% of the buildings were destroyed. And veteran sailors didn't recognize the coastline of Italy as they approached the coast. When an earthquake happens and the topography of the land is forever changed, the old maps don't work. You need a compass to navigate through the change, not a map. When an earthquake hits, the old maps don't work anymore. This is true for people, for leaders, and for brands. I'd like to look at some of the cultural earthquakes that are happening and we are collectively experiencing. And while it's important to build a compass to help you navigate through it all, as people and as brands, it's also important to recognize, next page, that each seismic shift offers us a gift. The trick is to build a compass to help you navigate and guide you and let you see the gifts. The first cultural, next page, the first cultural earthquake I'd like to talk about is the fall of the patriarchy. While the Me Too movement seems like ancient history in the wake of what we are experiencing now with COVID and the social justice movement that is occurring, we are still in it. The gift of the fall of patriarchy for women in business is freedom. Female leaders are now welcome to influence brands with their intuition, to connect with their employees and customers on a different level. I never have to worry about my daughter speaking up for herself. The gift of the fall of patriarchy has led to freedom for us. It has also led to the next page and the next earthquake, which is the rise of gender equality. The rise of gender equality means that as a working mom, I never have to choose anymore. I can be seen as both a highly engaged mom and highly competent leader. Those two things are not diametrically opposed. Pay equity is another gift of the rise of gender equality. And just yesterday, the Supreme Court made LGBTQ plus people protected in the workplace. So the fall of patriarchy led to the rise of gender equality. The next cultural earthquake that I want to talk to you about is how millennials ruin everything. Millennials, if this is just a smattering of headlines that we pulled, they killed the Big Mac, they killed lunch, they killed the diet. But as the mom of 3 millennials and 1 Gen Z, and as some of my colleagues at MullenLowe who call themselves Gen Zennials, I'm here to tell you that they're actually not ruining everything. The generation that was told that they got a trophy for everything are now looking for those shared trophies, but the trophies that they want are the trophies of social justice, an improved environment, and fair voting. Millennials are not ruining everything. They're actually holding up the mirror and making us better. Next slide. COVID, the current cultural earthquake. Unless you were someone who studied disease, you might not have seen it coming, but it turns out in retrospect that the signs were everywhere. The gift of COVID for me is that I have always advocated that people can be productive while working from home, that they can balance both being at home and being in the office and still contribute at a high level. In an instant, we all learned this. Brands who would have previously piloted and tested and piloted again stood up curbside pickup so that they could offer their products to their customers. The gift is that the weight of inertia was broken and the pace of change was accelerated. And after 6 months of messaging from everyone that we're all in this together, it's no surprise that, if you could go to the next slide, please. It's no surprise that we are all in this together, and that those millennials and Gen Zennials who are ruining everything are leading us to go from being neutral to being actively anti-racist. When something happens to one of us, it happens to all of us. And so I do feel like the gift of the coronavirus might just be sustained activism to bring about permanent change. Next slide. Thank you. I'm not controlling my slides. Trying to get a handle on that. So how do you build a compass? It takes time, it takes thought, and all of us can do it. The other thing that I want to offer is that it's not too late to start building your compass as a brand, as a leader. You need to do everything you can to learn and then start building, because the compass is what's going to help you navigate through a crisis. So the first thing you can do in building your compass, next slide, is to learn how to respond and not react. As we navigated our brands through the COVID crisis and now through the current social justice movement, we first told them to pause, to take a look at all of their communications, to respond to the moment, not to react to it. Did their communications match the tenor of the conversation that was happening? And how could they show up and be helpful rather than respond? Next page. It's important to sharpen your lens. When you're at the eye doctor's and he's trying on your lenses or she is trying on your lenses, with each new lens, the picture gets clearer. So how do you sharpen your lens in a moment of crisis like we are experiencing? You zoom out, you look at the bigger picture, you educate yourself, you deepen your knowledge, you look at the data. At MullenLowe, one of the tools that we use is called Speed Bag, and it identifies micro audiences and then watches what they do, watches what the influencers are doing. And we use that tool to deepen our knowledge and get as close as we can to our customers so that we can guide our brands to do the right thing. Next page. The Velveteen Rabbit, one of my favorite childhood stories. I can still hear my parents reading it to me. It was never the book they wanted me to choose at night because it was so long, but it was my favorite story. The Velveteen Rabbit's subtitle is How Toys Become Real. And I use this as I think about brands. My favorite line in The Velveteen Rabbit is the line that says, "For at least 2 hours, the boy thought the boy loved him." And as marketers, our job is to make sure that our customers love our brands for more than 2 hours. You don't get to say you're authentic. You don't get to say that you're real as a leader or a brand. You behave in a way that is authentic. You behave in a way that is real. And you are rewarded with loyalty, with followership. Real isn't something that happens to you. It's something that you become, and it takes time and it takes action. Respond, don't react, sharpen your lens. That's okay. You don't get to say that you're authentic. You also cannot make it about you. It's Simon Sinek, who's one of the people that I follow, talks about people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And they buy it when you don't make it about you. In the time of COVID and in the current social justice movement, consumers want to hear from brands, but they want to hear from brands when they're helping to solve a problem and when they're not making it about them. It's not enough to turn your avatar black. You have to change the color of your boardroom, of your leadership team, and of your employee base. That's how you don't make it about you. You make it about the work that you are doing with your employees. You look inward, you solve problems. Next page. Thank you. Don't respectfully disagree. I feel like we spend a lot of time protecting our own points of view and respectfully disagreeing with each other, which is just a nice way of saying, I don't want to take on what you are offering. Creating diverse teams is the antidote for this. If you have a room full of people who come with a lived experience that is different from yours and you take the time to listen, then you won't fall into the trap of the single truth. We need to spend less time respectfully disagreeing with each other and more time listening. I'm fortunate to work at a company where this is honored, where when I say that I want to take us in a certain direction, even when my team doesn't fully understand what I want, they listen, they deepen their knowledge, and we move forward together. This next one sounds a little harsh. No one is coming. While many of us would like David Beckham to ride into our backyards on a horse, no one is coming. You have to do the work yourself as a leader, as a brand, as a company. The work of deepening your knowledge and changing and looking inward is for you to do. No one's going to do it for you. And when we do this, we are able to create and innovate, make products and services that serve the larger population. No one is coming. The last one, the next one, pushing through your limiting beliefs. When you are navigating through a crisis, it's important to understand that it requires a certain amount of bravery. You're responding, you're sharpening your lens, you're digging into the data, but you can't obsess about the 10 things that you might do wrong. You need to feel the scary, evil DJ in your head that is telling you, maybe you shouldn't do this, and push through it and do it anyway. It's the DJ that I heard this morning before I clicked the Zoom link, and I pushed through it anyway. My limiting belief is, who the hell do you think you are? No one wants to hear from you. You don't have anything to say. I hear all of those things. I push through it and I click the Zoom link. This is true for leaders. It's true for emerging leaders, and it's true for brands. Navigating requires bravery. Next page. The last thing I want to leave you with is a quote from Joan Rivers, one of my idols. And she said, I'd like to tell you that it gets better, but it doesn't get better. You get better. As you build your lens, as you find the space between responding and sharpening, or you find the space between not making it about you and listening to other people, as you understand that it's up to you to do the work and that it's up to you to push through your limiting belief, you get better. What all of these cultural earthquakes have in common, and what we can learn from them, is that they all seem to strike us at 5:20 in the morning when we didn't expect them. But in retrospect, there were warning signs all along for all of them, for the fall of patriarchy, for gender equality, for COVID, and for the current social justice movement. There were warning signs all along. They demand a collective response, a coming together. They require us to listen. And importantly, they break the weight of inertia that has prevented us from making changes, and they accelerate the pace of change. Importantly, things never go back to the way they were. That's why they call it the new normal. When these earthquakes hit, the old maps don't work anymore. You have to build a compass to navigate through them. We are the navigators. I hope you found this helpful. I'd love to open it for questions. Thank you. Okay, so the question is, the fall of patriarchy. This is only prevalent in certain companies. How do we move toward a goal of ensuring women can speak up in male-dominated upper leadership environment? Whoa, big question to start with. I think that what I'm hopeful is that companies are not male dominated any longer. And I'm hopeful that because of the fall of patriarchy, that companies are open to more women's points of view. Companies are going to be held to account. So if they're not moving toward a very diverse workforce, then they're probably going to lose customers or employees. I'm going to have to think about how we move toward the goal of ensuring that women can speak up. I think it's more about finding the person that you trust will hear you and having sort of an accountability partner and maybe doing it together. What do I think brands should be focusing on right now with their message? I think this might be a question about the current social justice movement. I think brands should actually be focusing inward first. There is a great blog right now that's chronicling all of the things that brands are doing and showing up in the movement from being neutral to anti-racist. Brands like PayPal, who are committing, $500 million, or Apple, who committed 100 to help with the Black and minority communities. I think brands need to look inward and see what they're doing. What do their teams look like? What are their hiring practices? How are they developing minorities in the workforce? That's what I think brands should do first. And then while they're doing that, think about, what does the suite of products and services look like, and how am I serving those communities? What is my advice for organizations starting these conversations around social justice and identity for the first time? This is hard if you're doing it for the first time. I think that the best thing to do would probably be to start a series of listening sessions with your employees. There are several people that you can bring into your organization to help with those conversations. Having those kind of open town halls can be intimidating. We had a woman named Susan X. Jane come into our organization, and she uses a tool on Zoom that allows people to type in their questions without the crowd seeing it. And then once she's gathered all the questions, then she reveals it, and you have a really robust conversation about it. So I would say bring someone in. There's a ton of literature. We can send the link also after this that has links to books in the current environment, books like White Fragility. So you want to talk about race and how to be an anti-racist are sort of my top 3. We're reading them at MullenLowe right now. I think that's a step that an organization can take. Taking a look at their hiring practices is probably the most important. Dan G wants to know about my background and what drives me to speak up today. Okay, Dan, I am one of 6 children. All of my siblings are Black and Hispanic. So I grew up in a house that honored diversity, and I'm always looking to recreate that dinner table that I sat at growing up. So in terms of speaking up about helping brands and the company that I'm leading move from being neutral to anti-racist, that's where I come from. That's what drives me to speak up today. Okay, I have a question from Brooke. What would I tell my 10-year-old, 20-year-old, and 30-year-old self about preparing for what was to come in life? I would tell my 10-year-old self, who wanted to be president of the United States, that might not be your ambition later in life. I would tell both my 20-year-old and 30-year-old self that while it feels like things take a really long time to happen, that they actually happen a lot faster. I would tell them that my 20-year-old and 30-year-old self that you're going to learn more from the mistakes you made and the harder times that you're experiencing than you are from the happier times. Thank you for that question. I think that's what I would say. Let's see. Lori, how do we encourage and ensure our sisters on the journey are still bringing along other women, speaking up for other women in the room? Like the White House briefings where a reporter is cut off and has their question picked up and credited back to the original. Okay, so I think the simple thing that can be done in any room where you are is if you hear another woman speak, or if you're in a room and there's only one person of color and they speak, the way that you can help with that is to amplify their voice, to invite them to say it again. If somebody talks over them, to ask that person not to. I think that that's how we ensure that we're bringing everyone along, is that we make room for their voice in every room that we attend. Diane, I think Diane is asking how do women lead through a crisis? I think that's what she's saying. I can't speak for every woman, but I can tell you that the way that I'm leading through a crisis is to lean on all the things that I know emotionally to be true. And then I'm looking to the data to find out if what I'm feeling is actually what's happening. Because I think that that is something that women can do. And, you know, we for a long time were told that perhaps we were too emotional. And I think if you lean into that emotion and couple it with data, you will find the path forward. I'm looking for more questions. Can I talk about any clients that we've helped navigate through the COVID crisis? Was there pushback on our recommendations? Thank you, Susan. We built a tool. It's on the MullenLowe website. We made it public for everybody. So if you go to the front page of MullenLowe.us, I believe, or MullenLoweUS.com, you'll see the tool. And we didn't get any pushback. We quickly helped each brand first audit their communications, make sure that they were both on brand and match the tone. Some of our brands we stood up, like the Boston Globe, when the marathon was canceled, we helped them very quickly create communication that Boston is still running. Other brands like Royal Caribbean, we are helping them develop a commitment to customers about what it will be like to sail. I don't think that we got pushback because we looked at it as, let's match the curve and pace of a pandemic and find out where in each phase you should be doing what you should be doing. We didn't get pushback. And for JetBlue, you can look on YouTube and see JetBlue Junior. We created a learning platform where the pilots and crew members at JetBlue could talk about flying, and then we helped them think through sort of, what do you do when you are going to fly? That tool is available on the website, Susan, if you'd like to take a look at it. How do you convince clients to trust you in pushing them through their limiting belief and not making it about ourselves? So I think the most important work that we can do with our clients, that question is from Amy, is to first help them identify what is their purpose, what is their animating why, who are they here to serve, and what do their customers need. And when you deal in reflecting the data back to your clients, they can't argue with the truth. And then it's how you interpret it and help them with bravery. I also think, like in the case of a strange example, but in the case of Burger King, the way that we built trust with them was to have first very small wins in social media. And once we had a series of small wins with them, then they trusted us to create bigger wins for them. They handed their social media handles over to us once they understood that we knew their customers as well as they did. Okay, what is the greatest piece of advice you ever received? It's that no one is coming, that it's up to you to do the work. That, and I don't mean that in a sense that you're alone, because all of us have a tribe. All of us have that other someone that we do turn to ask for advice. But at the end of the day, it's up to us to do the work. That took me a long time to come to terms with, but it actually is the best advice I've ever received. You created your own personal blog a few years back, My Year of Whittling, to whittle away what doesn't matter and to focus on what really does. Thank you to whoever is writing this for reading my blog. It seems now more than ever, many people are trying to do the same. In addition to writing and sharing your experiences, what practice have helped you to move forward on what really matters? So the best practice that I have that helps me the most is that at the end of every day, I think about the best moment of that day. So even on the crappiest, hardest day, I think about what was the best moment of that day, and I savor it. And some days it takes me a little while to remember what it was, but then other days when I'm in it and I'm in that moment, I say to myself, this is going to be the moment that I savor tonight. And that practice sets me up to have a better night's sleep and a better morning. It's a simple thing. Some people meditate, some people work out. But what I do every night is I think back through my day and savor the best moment that happened for that day. How important do I think it is to show vulnerability to your employees in order to become a more authentic leader? Thank you, Lauren. I think this is what I was trying to get at with the Velveteen Rabbit, and that you don't get to say you're authentic. My team at MullenLowe, many of whom are on here today, they know that I have no problem when I'm feeling something deeply to let them know that I'm feeling it deeply. From the moment I walked in the door, and because I started that way with them, they expect that I will show up that way every day. I think it's hugely important for leaders to let their employees see them feel things. When you're living and leading in the time of earthquakes, it's impossible for you not to be affected by what's happening outside. And the more able you are to be in touch with your feelings about how you're being affected, the better you're able to connect with your employees and allow for their emotions to come into work. In the current crisis, the social justice movement, the biggest question that we got from people, and the question I see all over social media, is what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? And what I have learned from our employees is, what would you do if somebody that was close to you had died? How would you comfort that person? You would reach out to them. You would ask them how they were feeling. You would bring them food. It's like all of those things that you naturally do as a human being when you're trying to help a person have to come into the office. So I think it's hugely important to allow yourself to be vulnerable. What is my advice for a person of color who has to navigate through the politics of a non-diverse workplace? Oh, wow. I am not a person of color. And I'm doing the work of understanding my own whiteness, my own white privilege. I hope you are in an organization that honors what you bring. And if you are not, I hope you find an organization that honors what you bring. I think that now more than ever, you have the ability to speak up and be heard. And if you find yourself in a place that is not embracing that, it is not the place for you. Throughout my career, I have felt at times incredibly supported in my point of view, and there have been times when I haven't been as a woman. So I can only relate that to being a woman, but I'm trying very hard not to center myself in this while I answer this question for you. I think that it's time for companies, as I said, to change the color of their boardrooms and their leadership teams and their employees. And so if you are a person of color and you are the only, it's important for other people in your organization to show up as your allies so that you can see them and they can help you be seen. Let's see. I'm trying to. Luce, can you see there's a question? The screen has been black with no image. So are people not seeing me as I'm answering? Is it all black? I'm just,
nope. We
okay.
figured it out. That was awesome.
Oh, okay, because that's okay. Okay, in building my compass, which of my navigation points has been the most personally or professionally challenging for me? I'm going to think about that for a second. I think it would probably be respond, don't react. And I wish I could see some of my colleagues right now. This is one I work on all of the time. I have a very strong bias for action, and I want to act and react all the time. And I have a job that requires a lot of my energy and a lot of my time. So if I don't get a good night's sleep, eat well, take a walk, then my react mechanism is stronger than my response mechanism. So the hardest thing for me to build is that idea that I need to take a moment, pause, and then respond. It's something that I work on every day. And I really appreciate the question because it gives me the opportunity to say that as you build your compass, it's the idea that the Japanese call Kaizen change. So after Japan was destroyed in the war, they rebuilt Japan one brick at a time. Kaizen change, continuous small changes, continuous incremental changes result in big, significant moves forward. So as you're building your compass, if you do one small thing each day, then you're moving toward in the right direction. So for me, respond, don't react, is the thing that I work on every day. And I can feel my team saying yes. Okay, what next question? I agree that the millennial generation is showing itself to be much more than the common opinion of them. How do you suggest making space for them to assert themselves and leading in this moment? I find in my experience as a boomer that they are very respectful and deferential in a nice way. Wow, but you'd like to see them be less deferential. I think you should spend the day with me at MullenLowe. I find them very respectful, but I don't find them to be deferential. That's fascinating. I actually, as the mom of of 3 millennials, I don't find them deferential at all. In fact, there was one morning early in my tenure at MullenLowe where I got in an argument with my son Ryan, who's 22 this summer, and I couldn't see his point of view at all. He was being entirely respectful, but he had a different idea about something, and I couldn't see it. And we agreed to end the argument when he said that I was going to fail at this job at MullenLowe if I didn't get a mentor that was closer to his age than my age, because most of the people that I was managing were closer to his age. And so I did that. I got a mentor. Her name is Tamani. She's 29 years old. And when I asked her, maybe she's 28, I hope I didn't add age to her. When I asked her to be my mentor, I thought I had this like great new idea. And she responded by telling me that yes. And she had a lot of experience because I was the third president or CEO to ask her in that span of 6 months. So I would suggest surrounding yourself with a group of millennials. They're so passionate, and give them the space not to be deferential. We have a series at MullenLowe called Stoking Curiosity, where every Monday for an hour we invite a new speaker. And just yesterday we had 2 amazing millennials, one who was an intern 2 years ago and one who was an intern just a year ago, give us the history of the gay pride movement. I was blown away by all that I didn't know about the gay pride movement. And it came from the voice of people who are in that cohort of millennials. So I would invite them into the conversation in any way that you can. Okay. Did I, or prior to my current position, find advertising to be difficult to having your voice being heard in such a male-dominated industry? Was there anything specific I remember that was a turning point? Or did you get, I don't understand the last. So, yeah, so advertising for a long time has been male-dominated. I'm on the board of the 3% conference, whose goal is to get more female creative directors into the industry. You know, I was fortunate. I started my career at Hill Holliday, and at the time there were like 5 or 6 very senior women who all got pregnant at the same time, and the biggest struggle that they had was finding daycare. And so Jack Hunters opened Hill Holiday Daycare and subsidized it to sort of take that worry out of it for us. So while advertising in general it was male dominated, I never had that as a lived experience. I grew up as a producer in advertising, and my job as a producer was to make things happen. You know, the creative team would come up with an idea, and my job was to find a way to make it happen for the budget that we had. And so my voice was always heard. I feel fortunate in that. And I feel like because of that, I've always tried to amplify the voices of others as I've sort of progressed in my career.
So Kelly, I just time checking here. I know
Great.
We have 10 minutes left and a ton of questions. So if you don't mind, I think I'm gonna try to group them together a bit by theme.
Oh, good. Okay, thank you.
So let's do that. I know one question that's come up and also been emailed to us given your career trajectory is you've been in-house, now you're at an agency and leading an agency. There are a ton of people in the field on this call. What would you say to them, you know, in terms of your experience being the biggest difference, you know, going from being in-house in marketing to being in an agency? And do you see that as apples to apples, or what are your general thoughts about it and advice?
Yeah. So I was 20 years in advertising, 10 years at Bank for America, and now 2 years back in advertising. And the similarity in all of my jobs is that I've always stayed very close to the creative product, what brands are offering to the world. And so in that, I've always felt like I had the best job no matter where I was, because I was close to the people who are making things. I loved my time at Bank of America. I only have a bachelor's degree, and I feel like my time in-house at Bank of America kind of gave me an MBA 3 times over. We worked through the financial crisis together. The team, bonded in a way, and I learned so much about how to lead now because I had that experience. So I don't really feel like it's a this or that or us or them. I feel very enriched by all of the different experiences. I was happy to come back to advertising because of the energy in the organization that I work at. But because I was always close to the creative product, I don't really see them as different experiences.
So I think another good question that came up, sticking with this, is, David asks, are there companies or brands that you think have done a particularly good job reacting to the issue of racial justice, and any that messed it up?
Oh, gosh. Okay, so I think P&G has done a really good job. They have a great website. I think it might be called P&G on Race. I'm not sure. It was done by a gentleman named Keith Cartwright, who just opened his agency. He was part of a consortium called Saturday Morning, which is a consortium of agency professionals of color. But the P&G website does what I was talking about, that it's so important for brands to act and to behave in a way and not to say what they're doing. So when you go on the P&G website, you'll see their communication, and then it gives you a link to resources. Here's what you can read. Here's where you can donate. Here's how you can learn. So I think P&G has done a great job. I think Bank of America has done a great job with their $1 billion commitment to minority communities. PayPal, YouTube, Apple, they're all doing things. I think what I would like to see is, how are brands looking inward? How are they changing hiring practices? How are they changing job descriptions? Should we include degrees anymore on job descriptions? Does including a degree preclude somebody from applying? We're looking at all of those things at MullenLowe. How are you developing people of color? How are you retaining them? How are you bringing them in? And to the other person's question of, what advice do I have for people of color and how to make sure their voice is heard? That's an opportunity for companies and brands and leaders to hear and say, okay, I know what I need to do now to make sure that that voice is heard. Because when you have a diverse set of voices around the table and you don't spend time respectfully disagreeing with each other, the innovation and creation and solutions that come out of that are so much better than we just can't even imagine the solutions that we're going to get.
That's great. It goes back to what you were saying in your presentation about, you don't get to say you're a leader. And I think, companies are putting out statements, but consumers are smart enough to suss out whether or not they're doing the work and it's a part of their business model,
Right.
essentially.
Right.
So I think, sticking with that theme, I think a question, from our CEO and on all our minds as we think about, Boston's brand, right? And are we a welcoming city? And so as someone in the field, what would you say to that? I think, Boston has both the reputation and the reality of perhaps being racist given its history and busing. And how do we change that? If Boston were your client, and we were, working to attract people here and get across that we are a welcoming city, any advice there? I know I just threw a huge curveball at you.
Yeah. Remember what I told my 10-year-old self? So yeah, Boston has a history of not always being welcoming to people of color. We have work to do. We were going to be helping the NAACP, who was having their national convention here in July. I was looking forward to that work, bringing conversations. I think that, if you look at the work that the partnership is doing to bring more Black-owned businesses to the front, more Black professionals, the issue is that there has to be an openness to hearing other perspectives and a willingness to learn and shift. I think that the reason that what's happening right now feels like an earthquake is that, just like the Me Too movement, people knew that things were happening, but the weight of inertia was too much to bear. The same thing is happening right now with the move from being neutral to being anti-racist. I think that people will feel permission to lead in a way that makes them openly and actively anti-racist. If we do not do this, we will not fix our communities. We will not fix the image that Boston has. We will not fix our companies. We have to be openly and actively anti-racist. It's not enough to just be neutral anymore. I think that, BU bringing in Ibram Kendi, who wrote How to Be an Anti-Racist, I'm looking forward to seeing sort of the effect of him at BU and what that will do for the city of Boston and business communities. I'm encouraged that the NAACP chose Boston for its headquarters. I'm disappointed that COVID has killed the ability for us to meet together. But I think that if Boston were my client, I would tell them to first look inward. What can we do to be better? How are we going to be better? And I would listen to the voices in the city who have been saying for a long time that this is still a problem. And I would use their ideas to move forward.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kelly. I think that's a wonderful way to wrap us up. We're almost at time. Before I close us out, any final thoughts that you'd like to share? Oh, no.
Well, one, I just want to correct that Tamani is 26, my mentor, not 29. Thank you, Taylor. No, I feel like it's a really interesting, energizing time for us to be leading. And I think on this call, if you're an emerging leader or you are already cemented in your organization as a leader, there's so much opportunity for us to come together and manage through this latest cultural earthquake and do the right thing together. Thank you.
Can I just say that I love that you refer to your younger mentor as a mentor, right? I think a lot of people say, oh, this is reverse mentoring. It's like, no, this is still mentoring.
She's mentoring me. She sits me down and tells me what's happening.
That's incredibly important. Thank you for that. So
thank you,
Kelly, for being here with us today, to the MullenLowe team. Thank you to Lisa Barton and Morgan Lewis for sponsoring the series. And thank you to all of you. Have a wonderful day. We're signing off.
Thank you.
Thank you.